Chapter 759. It was rare for Madame Zhang to be in such a daze. She had been staying on the first floor near the door. She hadn't heard anything. Moreover, because of the young master's matter, she had been very attentive the whole night. How did young Master Jiao end up on her young master's bed? Bo Jiao could read Madame Zhang's gaze. But there wasn't much hope for Bo Jiao to admit that she was good at climbing walls. A handsome face broke into a smile. He landed lightly and took the bowl of porridge from Madame Zhang's hands calmly. It smells so good. Let Brother Mo have some when he wakes up. Madame Zhang knew that her young master's temper wasn't something an ordinary person could handle. With young Master Jiao around it would be better. But Madame Zhang wasn't assured. She said in a low voice, "I'll have to trouble young Master Jiao to take his temperature later. I'm not sure if his fever has subsided and young master didn't allow us to watch over him." Madame Zhang had a lot of instructions, but Bo Jiao didn't lose her patience. She stood at the side and listened attentively before replying. His fever should have subsided. I've changed a few towels, and when Brother Mo wakes up, I'll take his temperature again. I'll get him to drink more water and watch him eat a few mouthfuls of porridge. Madame Zhang heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you, young Master Jiao. Madame Zhang knew that even though her young master seemed polite, it was because of his upbringing. But from a certain perspective, his temper wasn't good, especially when he had just woken up. Fortunately, young Master Jiao was around. In front of young Master Jiao, her young master would always reveal his most popular side. But when Madame Zhang left the room, she was still wondering how Bo Jiao had entered. Perhaps Auntie Zhang had been a righteous person all her life and didn't know how to climb over walls. Therefore, no matter how she thought about it, she felt that there was something wrong with the door. After all, in Auntie Zhang's heart, young Master Jiao had always been a well-mannered and pretty kid. How could he do such a thing? Bo Jiao's expression didn't change in the slightest in the face of Madame Zhang's trust. To a wall-climbing student, climbing a wall wasn't a big deal. After sending Madame Zhang off, Bo Jiao turned towards the only bed in the room. The person on the bed had not woken up yet. His black hair was scattered messily, revealing half of his well-defined face. His thick eyelashes drooped down, casting a dark shadow. His outstanding facial features seemed especially harmless at this time. Bo Jiao liked seeing the Almighty like this. Whether it was the Almighty when he was young or the Almighty when he grew up. He wanted to put down the porridge and admire it for a while longer. She didn't expect the moment she took action. That person said, "Why don't you tell Auntie Zhang how you got in, wall-climbing genius?" Perhaps it was because he had just woken up, but his voice sounded deeper than usual. Bo Jiao. Xianxia had been awake since a while ago. He opened his eyes and glanced at the youngster. Just like that, he sat up. As the quilt slid down, his muscular chest and waistline were revealed. Just looking at them made one want to touch them. Bo Jiao had wanted to avoid arousing suspicion. She couldn't always take advantage of the Almighty, even if he liked her. But it just so happened that she wanted to be a gentleman. Chapter 760. When had she touched it? She couldn't even test the temperature through the blanket? Bo Jiao's gaze was clear. Xianxia ignored her. "I'm hungry." The Almighty wanted to eat porridge. Bo Jiao was smart. Even if she hadn't fed others porridge before, she had fed her pet before. Now that he had grown up, he felt pressured. But at the same time, he still looked good. Bo Jiao took the spoon and blew on it before passing it to Xianxia. Those who didn't know would think Xianxia was seriously injured. In reality, it was just a fever. But the youngster was taking care of him with a serious expression, as though she had completed a huge task. When Xianxia lowered his lids to eat the porridge, he gave off a fragile beauty. At that moment, Bo Jiao thought to herself that she couldn't let others see the Almighty's cold. It was too alluring. Xianxia noticed the youngster's gaze drifting over. His voice was calm. "What naughty thoughts are you having again?" Bo Jiao smiled. "What naughty thoughts can I have?" Protecting her pet was one of her missions. Feed him another mouthful. You can eat the rest. Xianxia reached out to stop her. He had lost his appetite from the fever, so how could he be hungry? He just wanted to see how the youngster was going to feed him. "You're not eating anymore?" Bo Jiao glanced at the bowl. She remembered Madame Zhang's instructions and smiled faintly. "Have a few more mouthfuls." Xianxia arched a brow. He tilted his head and took the business magazine over. His posture was steady. It was obvious he wasn't going to eat anymore. Bo Jiao wondered why he was still the same as when he was young. He was so hard to deal with, and yet he was so arrogant. Back then she had wanted to pounce on him and beat him up. It wasn't without reason. But now she could only coax him. Bo Jiao said, "Brother Mo, eat more. I'll play with you." Xianxia replied, "I'm done with the revival match. What about singing? The wall-jumping student wants to show off his flirting skills again? Eh. Chinamo placed the magazine down and smiled at her. His lips weren't warm at all. Was he still angry at her? Bojio didn't know what to do since she hadn't expected the Almighty to wait for her after witnessing that scene. Chinamo glanced at the dejected youngster in front of him. The more he looked up, the more he felt that this person really didn't know how to take advantage of the situation. He lifted his lids slightly, the business magazine in front of his legs still open. He sat as though he was in an international conference, pointing out the situation. Since you have so many conditions, why don't you let me kiss you? His voice was very light and indifferent. Bojio glanced up. Other than the Almighty, there was no other person in the world who would use such a tone to say such things. The two of them stared at each other. In the end, Bojio finished the bowl of porridge herself. Chinamo closed the magazine and looked out the window. The happiness on the corner of his mouth had obviously decreased. To Bojio it wasn't a big deal. At that time he could flirt with the Almighty because he didn't have any ideas. The reason why he wasn't flirting with her now was precisely because he had his own ideas. She was afraid that she would really snatch the Almighty away when she left. She often planned this. No matter how he avoided the police or how he avoided the security personnel, he could just get a private jet. Everything would be fine once they passed through the customs. But more importantly, even if she did all that, the Almighty was a dangerous person. She hadn't even reached America. The traces left by the Almighty would probably be enough for the crime squad to find her. Even though she shouldn't have the thought of kidnapping him. Chapter 761. Bojio sunk into her thoughts, her gaze sweeping over the thermometer at the side. After a moment, she brought it to the Almighty along with the cold medicine. Chinamo took the medicine cooperatively, his expression making it hard for Bojio to tell if he was happy or unhappy. But after taking the medicine he didn't touch the thermometer, looking as though he could do it himself if she wanted his temperature. Bojio felt that the time to test her gentlemanly character had arrived. She had to strip the Almighty personally, she had to take it easy. Bojio picked up the thermometer and swung it. When the mercury reached a suitable temperature, she pressed her long legs against the blanket, her left hand reaching for Chinmo's pajamas. However, he was still very well behaved and unbuttoned the top button. Chinmo placed the magazine down, looking at the youngster with a deep gaze. Do you think this is accurate? He exerted force, placing the youngster's palm on his chest. Bojio's ears flushed when the temperature reached her. The youngster was still proper, sticking to her position as she stuffed the thermometer into Chinmo's armpit. She retracted her hand quickly, but when she remembered that she would have to go through another round of seduction when she took the thermometer out, Bojio felt that it was a test. Chinamo didn't force her too much. Actually, it was enough as long as a certain someone appeared. When she lowered her head, she could see the youngster's side profile as she pulled out the thermometer. How could this youngster think of climbing over the wall to visit a patient? 37.6 degrees. He still has a slight fever. Bojio frowned, pulling the blanket over him. Rest for another day. Before Chinamo could reply, Bojio stood up. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and dialed Feng Yi's number. I won't be going today. MMH, he still has a fever. Me. Of course, I won't be going either. I have to look after Brother Mo. Send me the National League's information. I'll take a look at it with Brother Mo. Feng Yi had only wanted Little Spade to look after him for a day. How did it turn into 2 days? He knew he wouldn't be able to leave. Even if Little Spade wanted to leave, a certain someone would find a way to stay. But it wasn't a direct method. Chinamo was indeed thinking of a reason to force the youngster to stay if she wanted to leave. Now that he received such a call, the corners of his mouth curled up. Especially that sentence. Me. Of course I won't go either. I want to look after Brother Mo. It was pleasing to the ear. Bojio wasn't good at taking care of others. Other than when she was attentive towards Chinamo, she was indeed more manly in other aspects. For example, the princess was also hungry and meowed at the young man, asking him to fulfill his promise to feed her fish. Bojio thought for a moment. The princess was overjoyed. After that, Bojio poured some water for it. Drink it, princess. I've already taken off my fur and you're showing me this. Chinamo lay on the bed, watching the interaction between the cat and the human. He had wanted to call Feng Yi, but he retracted his hand. Since a certain someone was willing to stay, there was no need for him to think of other ways. However, there were 3 missed calls on the screen. Chinmo's eyes darkened. Then he looked up and glanced at the young man. The hand under the quilt was texting. Only 3 words, what is it? The Special Forces soldier on the other side of the phone had been waiting for news from the top. Chapter 762. Wu Zhen and Su Mei are investigating young Master Jiao's background. The moment he saw that sentence, Qin Mo's eyes were like the night that could devour everything, dark and cold. Address details. The moment the Special Forces soldier saw those words, he knew it wasn't convenient for his young master to call. In fact, the Special Forces soldier didn't address Qin Mo as young master just because he was the only son of the Qin family. There was another reason. Not many knew. When it came to international cases, Qin Mo's codename was Young Master. His subordinates would always address him as Young Master when they sent messages. Back then, Qin Mo had been young, a high school student, but he had become an unpredictable detective. That wasn't all, many international cases had been handled by Young Master. After so many years, even Director Huang hadn't known. Qin Mo's authority had always been above the crime squad. Of course, the Special Forces soldiers he led weren't simple either. After realizing the problem, the Special Forces soldier dialed Qin Mo's number. "I'm at a county hospital in the southeast of Jianghu City. Wu Zhen used her police badge and is investigating something. Even though I'm not sure of the specifics, she got someone to investigate young Master Jiao's birth data. Last night they got the hospital director to look into it again. What should we do?" Qin Mo's voice was low and deep. "Young Master, it's not convenient over there. Listen to me. I'm at a county hospital in the southeast of Jianghu City." While Qin Mo was on the phone, Bo Jiao glanced over at him. Qin Mo replied as though he was dealing with a business matter. "Since someone is looking for trouble, let's cut her off." It was a code word. Those who worked under Qin Mo could naturally tell what he was talking about. "I'll contact the local troops and get them to send someone over to deal with this." More importantly, someone was abusing his identity as a criminal police officer after leaving his post. The Special Forces soldier narrowed his eyes. "Indeed, it's time to get serious. Do as you see fit." Qin Mo flipped through the business magazine, his attitude nonchalant. "Remember to send me the information after you cut her off. As for the rest, do as you please." The Special Forces soldier felt a chill down his spine as he listened to the voice on the other side. This time, young master must be really angry. Director Huang had made a huge mistake. Or perhaps it had nothing to do with Director Huang, it was a problem with the system. Because Wu Zhen's surname was Wu, they did not follow the procedure to collect her documents. He was still thinking of switching levels. The Special Forces soldier shook his head and jumped into the car door like a leopard. Even when he was driving, he had this kind of drive. From this, one could see. Qin Mo, who could command such a person at any time, was never simple. Bojiao was still watching the Almighty. On the other side, Qin Mo had already hung up the phone. He flipped through the magazine as if nothing had happened. At that moment, Bojiao started to suspect that she was overthinking. She had clearly seen the intense hostility in the Almighty's eyes. How did he turn back into a sickly beauty, after a flash? Qin Mo allowed the youngster to size him up. His handsome side profile didn't change at all. Instead, he looked even more elegant and elegant. The hand that was transfusing the fluid was just casually placed there. He did not know if it was intentional or not. When Bojiao saw this, her suspicions disappeared. On the other hand, when Qin Mo lowered his lids, a glint flashed across his eyes. Chapter 763. Looking at it from his angle. The youngster was lowering her head and stirring something. After a while, she asked, "Brother Mo, I'll use your computer to receive the video Feng Yi is sending." MMH. Qin Mo closed the magazine. Bojiao placed her phone at the side. It wasn't locked and the screen was still lit up. The screen was a photo of them on the bed. Qin Mo watched as the screen slowly darkened. Warmth finally returned to his eyes. Bojiao was a hacker that respected privacy. The moment she saw the lock on the laptop, she turned to glance at Qin Mo. Her hands itched to unlock the lock before she locked the laptop again. "Brother Mo, what's the password?" Bojiao go all out. Qin Mo glanced up, his eyes curved. "You solved it once, didn't you remember?" Bojiao. She had been so focused on solving it for fun that she hadn't paid attention to the password. But Bojiao. That was the password. The youngster paused for a moment before lowering her head to fiddle with the laptop. It seemed as though she was forcing herself to do something. Fortunately, receiving a document was a breeze for her. "There's a match between the foreign teams?" Bojiao glanced at the notes, arching a brow. She lifted the laptop with one hand and placed it on the bed. She sat down so Qin Mo wouldn't have to get up to see it. Qin Mo swept a glance over the characters on the screen. The Japanese. It wasn't the right time to mention this team. Both of them still remembered the scene from yesterday. Fortunately, Qin Mo didn't linger on this topic. Let's go back and take a look at the operation. Bojio was naturally more active and less talkative. Gradually, the two of them focused their attention on the analysis of the operation. At the same time, Supreme Alliance was playing the same video. After watching it, there was dead silence. Feng Yi pushed up his glasses and switched off the device in his hand. That's amazing. Someone couldn't help but comment. Even Yun, who didn't refute. Feng Yi was a sly fox, be it in the business world or in the meeting. I'm showing you this to make you realize that even though the revival match is easy, the National League isn't as simple as it seems. You are the last team to make it to the finals. Compared to Supreme Alliance, the other 9 teams aren't to be underestimated, not to mention the Japanese on the international server. This isn't enough. Be vigilant in times of peace. This was what Feng Yi wanted to tell them. Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao looked at each other and clenched their fists. The stronger the opponent, the more he could stimulate his fighting strength. This was not a lie. After watching the video, the atmosphere in Supreme Alliance changed. Those who practiced hand speed, and those who studied tactics. Feng Yi walked out of the conference room with a faint smile. The club director who was following him was still very worried. CO Feng, what rank do you think we can get this time? Feng Yi paused. I thought Director Zhang had always known Supreme Alliance's target. Hearing this, Minister Zhang was stunned and smiled bitterly. CO Feng always seems to be so confident. You saw it just now. The opponent is too strong. So what? Feng Yi glanced over. Supreme Alliance has always been strong against strong opponents. The stronger you meet, the stronger you become. When Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao walked out and heard those words, their chests felt hot. That's right. Chapter 764. Are you leaving later today? Shui Yaoyao tilted her head towards Feng Shang. Feng Shang stuttered, nodding his head. No one knew how many times they had trained together after losing the semifinals. What was worth celebrating was that his efforts were finally starting to show results. When he turned around, Yin Weiyao leaned against the door frame, a cigarette dangling from his lips. You're playing in an internet cafe? I can stay till 9. Shui Yaoyao reported the time. Feng Shang refused to back down. I can stay at Uncle's place. Cough. Yin Weiyao choked. You don't have to stay. Feng Shang was stubborn. Well, why? Yin Weiyao. Would I say I'm afraid of being misunderstood as gay? You're still young, you can all go home. Yin Weiyao flicked his cigarette. Just remember what you want to achieve. Time always passed very quickly during training. Yin Weiyao was a veteran and he knew that while they were researching the other teams, they were also researching them. It wasn't just the esports industry, even ordinary gamers knew that there would be an international competition after the National League. At this moment, the Japanese, who were hailed as the godly team, were trying to calm down the commotion caused by their members the day before. What did I say? The manager pressed his forehead. Don't go out, don't go out. Watanabe sat across from him in a carefree manner. He was still handsome. Well, nothing happened, right? That's because Vice Captain is around. The abandoned doll-faced man was still fuming, pointing at the OK sticker on his face. Look at what you did to me. Watanabe coughed in embarrassment. Shouldn't you introduce the team? China's National League is just around the corner, isn't it? Hearing this, the manager suppressed his anger. His finger pressed the mouse beside him and clicked. Our old rival Xianhuan, I believe you are familiar with them. This time their fighting strength has improved. Before the manager could finish, Watanabe interrupted him. I've seen Xianhuan, let's take a look at Supreme Alliance. Supreme Alliance? Which team was that? The Japanese were confused. They glanced at the information and found the word Supreme Alliance at the end. This team? The person who was sitting on the balcony suddenly jumped down with a smile on his face. He looked very feminine and even his hair was long. However, he was obviously a man and yet he was so beautiful. Apart from Lin Feng didn't expect there to be another person. Furthermore, his demonic aura was a little more intense. Is there anything worthy of your attention? Hoshino, did you bring them to watch the revival match because of Supreme Alliance? Don't disturb me. Hoshino pushed her away. Ayaya, is this how you treat me, the captain? That's right, the bewitching man was the captain of the Japanese team, Yusishin. Hoshino tilted his head, changed his position and continued to sleep. Yusishin didn't make a fuss, he propped up the side of his face. Seems like it's true. Let's take a look at Supreme Alliance and see what's so special about them that my vice-captain has to come personally and cause trouble for 2 kids. The troublemaker Watanabe shrunk his neck. Their captain was beautiful, but she wasn't someone to be trifled with. The agent changed the video material. But Supreme Alliance had been silent for a long time. Therefore, the information on the battle was not very complete. Chapter 765. Even though they are good, I feel that Xuanhuan is cooler. The youth pointed at the video. For example, this person's technique looks impressive, but Watanabe mentioned that he would be able to resolve it. The person the baby-faced man was referring to was none other than Qin Mo, an immature team. Yu Cixin arched his brow. He is quite handsome. Does their team choose their members based on looks like ours? He was asking Hoshino. Hoshino couldn't be bothered with him. The youth looked as though he had suffered a huge blow. Based on looks? Not based on ability? How is that possible? Don't worry, you aren't in the range of looks. Watanabe reached out and patted the youth's shoulder. You aren't that good looking after all. The youth? F***ck, he really wanted to kill his teammates recently. But Yu Cixin stood up. He looked like a king when he looked down from above in his uniform. We'll worry about them when they defeat Xuanhuan. His captain was implying that Supreme Alliance couldn't defeat Xuanhuan. Captain, do you think they are too weak? Yu Cixin laughed. How is that possible? The most handsome one is amazing. Ayaya, it would be great if we could poach him over. The youth? A newcomer like the youth probably didn't understand Yu Cixin's words. But Hoshino could understand it. Supreme Alliance. A portion of the members were too weak. During the revival match, they realized that they couldn't come out. During the National League, this would be the most fatal. The sunlight dimmed slowly. He was an esports professional player. Especially as the vice-captain of a team. The only person who fell asleep while watching a professional battle was the youngster beside him. Qin Mo glanced over at the youngster whose head was on his shoulder. He removed the notebook and pressed his hand on the man's head. Her silver hair was soft, and when it slid through his fingers, it was easy to like the feeling. Bojio woke up immediately. She rubbed her eyes with her fists. Do you want to drink water? Or do you want to eat? Or go to the toilet? I'm going to the toilet. Can you help me take off my pants? Qin Mo asked slowly. Bojio's sleepiness disappeared instantly. How could the Almighty be so bad? When they were young, he would hug her and shake his adorable little head, telling her that he wasn't going anywhere. Her canine pet had changed. So cunning, black-bellied, and venomous. But Qin Mo didn't go anywhere. It felt good to touch the youth. The Almighty must have made a mistake. She should be the one caressing his head. Whose pet was he? Seeing that the other party was sick and that his illness was related to her, she decided to let him go. Bojio didn't say anything since it felt good to be touched. Qin Mo smiled faintly. Bring me a book. Novels? Bojio found it a good way to pass the time. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. Poetry collection. After all, I'm not like a certain someone who can't understand. Overbearing CEO falls in love with me, my little surrogate wife, and sugar daddy come and feed me. Can't this joke pass? She didn't read those books either. Bojio jumped up, looking suave even when she got off the bed. Qin Mo watched as the youngster was sent away. He glanced over at the phone that had been vibrating. Chapter 766. It was impossible for Bojio not to notice him fiddling with his phone. After all, she was more familiar with the sound of any electronic device than anyone else. But she felt that she had to leave some dignity for her sick pet. It was better to act as though she didn't know anything. Besides, the only thing the Almighty was avoiding her to talk about was the crime squad. Bojio had her own ways of investigating people. For the time being, she didn't need to use any tricks to get information from the Almighty. Hence, after the notification disappeared, Bojio casually picked up a book. Actually, the Almighty's bookshelf was filled with criminal psychology books and financial books. It wasn't easy to find anything else. Qin Mo placed his phone down, glancing at the book in the youngster's hands. You like this? It's all right. Bojio didn't know the content. She just didn't want a certain someone to keep sending messages. That would make her hands itchy. Qin Mo chuckled. Pass me the book. Bojio was obedient at this moment. She sat down and handed the book over, wondering if she should take one out for a look. Or play hero on her phone. Unexpectedly, she didn't manage to do either. Just then she heard the flipping of pages. Then came the low voice beside her ears. Qin Mo's natural low voice was especially alluring today, carrying a unique quality. I still like you, walking 8,000 miles with the wind, never asking when you will return. When these words rang out, Bojio glanced up instinctively. That was when she realized that the Almighty was reading the book in front of him. His voice was so pleasant to the ears. Bojio didn't interrupt, her eyes turning towards the flipped piece of paper. The low voice beside her ears was still there. I still like you, like an old city gate waiting for an old friend standing alone? Her hands were indeed itchy. She watched as the person leaned against him, reading the poem. Bojio didn't know how many times she had told herself. Kidnapping this person would definitely be troublesome. But she still wanted to kidnap him. Bojio lowered her head as she thought about her plan. She didn't notice the warmth in Chinmo's deep eyes when she lowered her head. When a certain someone stayed by his side obediently and read with him, she was indeed likable. This fellow was still the same as before, liking to stay by his side and listen to his stories. Wait a minute, why did he say it was the same as before? Chinmo's thick brows furrowed, followed by an intense pain. The bone-piercing pain was simply unbearable. The book in his hand fell to the ground. The first thing Bojio did was press down on his head, panic written all over her eyes. Zhang. Chinmo reached out and held onto the youngster's wrist, his forehead covered in sweat. I'm fine. Bojio was still worried. She had never felt that she was clumsy, but at this moment, she felt that she couldn't do anything right. Is the temperature rising again? He touched it with the back of his hand and found that there was indeed a little. Chinmo pressed down on her hand. His head wasn't hurting as much anymore, but there was one thing he was sure of. He needed to do a brain checkup. Chinmo knew that this headache had nothing to do with his flu. It was the same last time. It suddenly hurt. Perhaps not all of a sudden. Chapter 767. Bojio noticed the Almighty's gaze and assumed he was still in pain. Hence, she started to massage his head gently. Some people. They were born with the dark side. But even so, in front of a certain person, they would retract all their thoughts. To Bojio, Chinmo was that certain person. Childhood companionship was important. No one could explain it clearly. Madame Zhang heard the commotion and hurried over. Young Master Jio, what's wrong? Brother Mo has a headache. Could I trouble Madame Zhang to make a call? The Qin family should have a private doctor. Bojio didn't give Chinmo a chance to speak. Madame Zhang didn't either. Her decision was the same as young Master Jio's. At this moment, Chinmo found it interesting. Why did this guy raise him like a glass doll? Because of their posture. Chinmo reached out and held onto her waist. He did the same. Bojio was busy massaging the Almighty's head and didn't notice his actions at all. In Bojio's heart, she had always been the one taking advantage of the Almighty. It wasn't easy to change such a mindset. The private doctor came quickly since Chinmo was already running a high fever. But there was something he was puzzled about. In the past, when young Master Qin had fainted from the fever, he hadn't said he wasn't feeling well. When it was extremely uncomfortable, he would just allow the doctor to insert needles and close his eyes to rest. Why did young Master Qin always say he wasn't feeling well? His fever was almost gone. When the private doctor heard the diagnosis, he suspected that there was something wrong with his medical skills. He glanced up wanting to ask something. But just then he met young Master Qin's warning gaze. He glanced at the good-looking youngster beside him, who was looking at him anxiously. Then he turned to young Master Qin, who had recovered but insisted that he wasn't feeling well. The private doctor understood very well what this meant. He coughed softly. Bojio watched as he kept the stethoscope and smiled faintly. Doctor, how is Brother Mo? The fever is gone, but young Master Qin is still very weak. When saying this, the private doctor's face didn't change, but he still felt guilty. I'm afraid that he will get worse tonight, and he needs someone to accompany him at all times. It's best to take his temperature every hour and give him a head massage when necessary. Bojio listened attentively and memorized almost everything he needed to remember. All right. The private doctor glanced at the person lying on the bed again. After receiving the hint, he added, it's best if someone can keep watch at night. Usually viral colds get worse at night. Is that so? Do we need to continue the drip for Brother Mo? Bojio arched a brow. The private doctor hurriedly said, there's no need for that. Now that young Master Qin was full of energy, what else would he need to inject within 4 drip? Do I need to take any medicine? The private doctor wanted to say that there was no need. The person behind the youngster nodded. Only then did the doctor change his tone. Yes, the medicine is below. I'll give it to Aunt Zhang later. All right. Bojio got the answer she wanted. She tossed the doctor aside and pulled the blanket over him. The private doctor had never seen anyone take care of young Master Qin like this. He really wanted to wipe his sweat. But he didn't dare to do anything. Young Master Qin's gaze was clearly saying, hurry up and leave. The private doctor immediately took his leave and disappeared very quickly. After all, even he felt that his young master was too shameless. Chapter 768. Bo-Jio used a never-before-seen patience to take care of Qin-Mo. Honestly, she wasn't someone who knew how to take care of others. But this time she knew to adjust the pillow for him. Of course there was also his temperature. Bo-Jio felt that it wasn't easy to take his temperature. She had to suppress her urge to take advantage of him. That wasn't good. But on second thought, it was rare to see the Almighty so weak. He was a sickly beauty in white pajamas with black hair and a poetry book in his hands. She would take advantage of him. Qin-Mo lifted his lids, looking at a certain someone who had taken advantage of him and was smiling. He couldn't help but laugh. What was wrong with her? What are you laughing at? Bo-Jio tilted her head. Qin-Mo arched a brow. I'm laughing? Of course, are you laughing because of my handsomeness? Bo-Jio passed him another book. Sometimes, listening to the Almighty read was a form of enjoyment. Since he was a criminal psychologist, he would definitely know what tone to use to read the words. It would be easier to move a person's heart. With the Almighty's skills, he would be able to become famous quickly if he was a CV. But, with that thought, Bo-Jio realized a problem. The person sitting in front of her. Did he even know how to hypnotize people? Qin-Mo flipped open the book in his hands, his voice casual. Tell me about your childhood. Childhood? Bo-Jio glanced over, pushing her bangs to the back of her head. I loved fighting. She wasn't sure why the Almighty was asking about her childhood. But she knew it was probably to test her. The Almighty had been investigating her. He only started from the Fu family. They couldn't find anything. Bo-Jio was sure of that. But the rest, unless the Almighty had found something else. Bo-Jio was still smiling. It was a habit. Brother Mo, what about when you were young? She really wanted to hear what her canine pet thought of her. They started talking about such topics. It wasn't within her expectations, but it wasn't bad. Reading at home. Qin-Mo's voice was calm. Sometimes I would join the armed forces. Bo-Jio listened to his activities, a phrase appearing in her mind. A real warlord's son. But, what else? The Almighty hadn't mentioned her. He had to get the whole thing out of her. Qin-Mo closed the book in his hands. Nothing else. Nothing else? Bo-Jio stilled. How could there be nothing else? Qin-Mo noticed that the person in front of him kept looking at him. He arched a brow. What's wrong? Oh. Should he say that he was disappointed? That shouldn't be the case. But he couldn't explain it clearly. This doesn't seem right. But why weren't there any others? When Bo-Jio lowered her lids, she smiled and continued, I thought someone like Brother Mo would have been to many places when he was young since he is of mixed blood. No. Qin-Mo replied instinctively. Then he glanced up. Perhaps I have, but I can't remember. What did forget mean? Bo-Jio glanced at him. Qin-Mo glanced over. Grandfather said he brought me to America, but I have no recollection of it. It's the same with other things. I lost a period of memory. Bo-Jio hadn't expected such an answer. He had never seen anyone so calm when they said that they had amnesia. Chapter 769. The personal doctor you saw just now would occasionally check on my mental state. Qin-Mo chuckled with a hint of mischief in his voice. Do you think my mental fortitude is better or his mental fortitude is better? Bo-Jio understood. The Almighty had never been cured. Based on his battle experience, he was confident. The Almighty had never tested anyone's mental state in front of her before. But everything had to do with the fact that he had washed his hands. Bo-Jio hadn't forgotten. Who had caused her such a huge loss? Hence, a normal psychologist wouldn't be able to deal with the Almighty. Did that mean the amnesia was selective? Fortunately, it's just my childhood. Also, why was his hand injured so badly? What was with the water covering his head? Qin-Mo glanced down at his hand, his gaze sinking. Bo-Jio wanted to say, but you had me when you were young. But she thought about it. She lifted her head and drank the water in her hand. Then a faint smile. It had started from the day she had left. Her father had told her. It was best to forget about her pet. It was a form of protection. But, Bo-Jio narrowed her eyes. No one would lose their memory for no reason. Especially when it was selective. Bo-Jio wanted to know what exactly had happened to the Almighty for her pet to forget himself. But there was a benefit. He couldn't remember. She didn't have to worry about the Almighty guessing her identity and could speak casually. Bo-Jio chuckled. It was interesting when I was young. I met an extremely beautiful little boy, but his eyes were so big that they were on top of his head and he looked at everyone as though they were germs. In the end, he couldn't defeat me and became my pet. He must have been afraid of the dark, otherwise, he would have chased me away when I went to disturb him at night. He wouldn't have given me half of his bed every time. More importantly, he was comfortable to hug, but he always refused to let me hug him. Don't you think he was too shy? Qin Mo's voice turned cold. Who is the little boy you were talking about? Your idol Hoshino? Bojio hadn't expected the Almighty to misunderstand and felt as though she had dug a hole for herself. No. It's best if he's not. This kind of boy who has been lying since he was young and slept with him must be very cunning. If you see this kind of person in the future, stay away from him, understand? As soon as Qin Mo finished speaking, the young man smiled. For some reason, she looked especially happy and nodded vigorously in agreement with his argument. Seeing that the effect was good, Qin Mo thought about it and decided to blacken his childhood love rival to the end. People with eyes on the top of their heads are probably too arrogant. Why do you want to be friends with them? So Brother Mo doesn't like him? I think he's rather cute. It was interesting to hear the Almighty ridiculing himself. Bojio cupped her cheek with one hand, her eyes narrowing into slits. Qin Mo scanned the youngster. Cute? Hey, it's more like it's just a facade. Great God, I hope you've recovered your memory and remember what you're saying now. Bojio couldn't take it anymore. She tilted her head and couldn't help but laugh. Only when he laughed. She still hadn't forgotten the most important thing. Who had caused her pet to become like this? Chapter 770. Time trickled by slowly. Everyone knew that the National League was coming. As long as the contestants could pass the exams, it didn't matter if they missed out on classes. Hence, that day Boju didn't go anywhere. She stayed at the Qin family's main house. No one knew, or rather, no one would deliberately think about where the young master of the Fu family was born. Even xuanhuan had long thrown this matter to the back of her mind. After all, in her memory, the county hospital was still a small hospital. 17 years could change many things. In fact, even the floors had changed quite a bit. The address of the county hospital had also changed. No one could find that place. Xuanhuan didn't realize a problem. Hospitals in towns and villages were usually run by the state. For hospitals run by the state, the files would follow the change of address. However, it was indeed a waste of time and manpower to search for it. It wasn't easy for Wu Zhen and Su Mei to find Xuanhua's name from the 4 months of files. Wu Zhen was smart and knew that it was a waste of manpower. She offered a high price and found some people to search with her. The director felt that it wasn't appropriate. But they were from the police. Besides, these weren't confidential documents. They were just born at a time and didn't say much. She let almost 10 people in. These people were quite happy. After all, such jobs were rare in the county. They could earn 500 yuan in a day's search. It wasn't a small sum. In the afternoon, the beautiful lady spoke again. The beautiful young lady spoke again. She said that it would be calculated by the piece. Whoever found it faster would get a raise in salary. This time, only the sound of paper flipping could be heard in the archives. Miss Wu is smart. Su Mei had always been clear of her position. Since she knew that Wu Zhen couldn't be provoked, she naturally went along with her. Wu Zhen glanced at her, flipping through the files in her hands. Let's see the results now. To Wu Zhen. Some things could only be solved by spending money. Moreover, it could indeed increase efficiency. This had always been her strength. She knew what the system was like. And she knew it in her heart. This time, Su Mei had found her. The secret she mentioned should be able to completely destroy that gay. If not, he wouldn't have the guts to offend the Qin family. Wait until she dug out the secret. It would also be able to dissipate the hatred in her heart. Su Mei's eyes were also shining. All she needed now was one piece of evidence to prove her conjecture. It was really what she guessed. That little country bumpkin had lost all his reputation. The National League would also reconsider whether or not he was qualified to participate. After all, his identity as a boy was a huge scam. The more Su Mei thought about it, the faster her hands moved. She believed that in another day they would be able to find the evidence. Tomorrow they would hire more people. Soon they would succeed. Wu Zhen thought so too. After all, no one could stop her from doing what she wanted to do. The hired workers were also thinking of ways to earn more money. But at this moment, for some reason there was a commotion outside. The hospital director ran in, sweating profusely. Stop, stop. Chapter 771. The hospital director didn't speak. The temporary workers, who were still in a daze, saw a few people in camouflage uniforms rushing in. Even though they didn't have guns in their hands, no one dared to move in such a situation. The hospital director hurriedly went forward. The leader was a military officer. He looked at the director. Are you the person in charge here? Yes. The hospital director had never seen such a situation before. His heart was pounding. The military officer gestured and the rest walked forward, guarding the files. The higher-ups have given orders to find out how many newborns there are in the area. We will take over the information. Wu Jin's eyes dimmed. It wasn't easy for her to find out. Why were the troops here? Sume was puzzled. What was going on? Miss Wu, what should we do now? She had been stabbed in the back by someone like that. What about the secret? Wu Jin stood outside the door. Seeing her temporary workers being chased out, her face darkened. Her identity as a police officer was useless against the people in the army without negotiation from the higher-ups. These soldiers did not look like hospital directors, nor did they look like some of her colleagues. They were like a hard rock when it came to executing missions. They weren't affected by force or persuasion. If they didn't receive orders, the mission wouldn't end. It seemed like she had to use her connections. Wu Jin glanced at the darkening sky. I'll make a call. Most of the Wu family's connections were in the city center. Almost all of the directors were inseparable from the Wu family. A county-level military unit like this? It would be easy to find the Jiang family. The aristocratic families had connections. Since the Wu family and the Yin family were aristocratic families, their relationship with the Jiang family wouldn't be too bad. Wu Jin thought about it. There wouldn't be any important missions in such a small place. Moreover, it was related to the livelihood of the people. There was room for negotiation. If Jianghu asked, it wouldn't be a problem for her to get the information of one or two people. After all, that person had a military rank on him. Jianghu received Wu Jin's call on his last day in the Jiang family. Even though Mother Shui had promised Shui Yaoyao to stay outside, she would still call her daughter home on such occasions. Regardless of what was going on outside, the family had to maintain the basic liveliness. This was what Mr. Jiang had always emphasized. It could be seen that Father Jiang was in a good mood because he did not expect that his son, who had always been at odds with him, would sit there and eat without saying anything. Even though his expression wasn't great, it was much better than when Mother Shui had first met him. Because of this impromptu family gathering, Shui Yaoyao's training didn't last till the end. But even Mother Shui could tell that her daughter had never worked so hard before. Looking at her face, which was no longer round, Shui Mining couldn't help but sigh. Mama Shui didn't dare to put food in Shui Yaoyao's bowl. He was afraid that he would agitate Jianghu again. He didn't want to see a loving mother and a filial son. Old Jiang also said that some things and some words should not be said in front of Jianghu. Brother Shui, who was sitting beside her, frowned when he saw Yaoyao. Sis, did you lose weight? As soon as he said that, Jianghu, who had been eating silently, put down his chopsticks and wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin, his eyes fixed on Yaoyao. The atmosphere was a little tense. Brother Shui regretted what he had said. Shui Yaoyao, on the other hand, was much braver than before. After she finished the pork ribs, she lifted her head and smiled. There has been too much training recently, so everyone lost weight. It's normal. Chapter 772. Jianghu looked at her, placing the tissue down. Brother Shui heaved a sigh of relief. He admired his brother, but at the same time he felt pressured. Shui Yaoyao had indeed lost weight. The clothes she used to wear were a little shaky. Even her battle uniform had been changed by Feng Yi. Every fat person who slimmed down would be a successful countervailing force. This sentence was indeed not wrong. Shui Yaoyao was originally very fair, but probably due to the exhaustion from training, she didn't wear her personal clothes. Instead, she wore a dashing uniform. To make it easier to play games, she changed her hairstyle. In the past, she used to let her hair down, the thick bangs making her look young. Now, she tied her hair into a high ponytail, her pure black hair complementing her beautiful eyes. Even Father Jiang smiled. Yaoyao has changed a lot, not bad, not bad. Mother Shui was gratified. She didn't come from a good background, but she understood the changes her daughter had undergone since she entered Supreme Alliance. Hence, even though she hadn't seen the Highness Jiao that her daughter had mentioned, deep down she was grateful. Jianghu was also looking at Shui Yaoyao, but his eyes dimmed. Just as he was about to say something, Wu Jin called. He frowned, then stood up, looking like he was going to answer the call. The Jiang father and son had always had a knot in their relationship. Father Jiang looked at Jianghu, sighing softly. Shui Yaoyao had finished her meal. She couldn't stand being in the Jiang family anymore. Since the main character had left, it wouldn't be rude for her to leave. If it had been in the past, Shui Yaoyao would have been disappointed to see Jianghu answer a girl's call. But now, most of her thoughts were on training. Shui Yaoyao thought it would probably be better in the future. She glanced at the time on her phone. If she went to the internet cafe at this hour, she should be able to play with the uncle. Since Feng Shang was staying in the internet cafe, she couldn't be left behind. But she hadn't expected Jianghu to walk out to the courtyard to make a call. It was in the direction of the door. Shui Yaoyao wasn't someone who would eavesdrop. But he was smoking, his phone placed there as though he had pressed the speaker button. He could clearly hear the person on the other end of the line saying, "Brother Mo has been deceived and isn't clear about young Master Fu's background. I'm currently investigating. Don't you want to know his secret?" According to his stepmother, that person didn't lie to Brother Mo just a little. "Even if you don't want to know, your sister can at least get some face from you. There are people from the military here. You can call them and ask them to show me the information. I won't take it away. How about that? Young master of the Fu family? Brother Mo? Secret? Deceive?" Shui Yaoyao froze when she heard these key words. The lie he mentioned, could it be? Shui Yaoyao didn't know where the courage came from, but she walked towards Jianghu. She snatched Jianghu's phone and hung up. She realized what she had done. When she lifted her lids, she met Jianghu's beautiful chin. The man still had a cigarette in his mouth. When he looked at her, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. It was as if he was saying, "Are you crazy?" Chapter 773. Jianghu had known Shui Yaoyao for a long time and naturally knew what she meant. "You're admitting that you took that photo to threaten me?" "Yes, I admit it." Shui Yaoyao clenched her fists tightly. "I'm despicable and shameless, but His Highness Jiao isn't. His Highness Jiao isn't like what Miss Wu said." Jianghu suddenly laughed, the coldness in his eyes sending chills down her spine. "You gave up on threatening me because of someone else. That's infuriating. Shui Yaoyao, what would you do if I said I didn't agree? Would you run to your mom or dad and say that you seduced me? Those photos." Shui Yaoyao's face was pale as though all the life had been sucked out of her. Jianghu walked towards her, his voice low. "I don't care, it's just a half-naked upper body, you can copy it however you want." Shui Yaoyao shuddered. She was useless, she couldn't protect the person she wanted to protect. That person told herself. Even an ordinary girl had the right to dream. If the secret was exposed, what would it be like? It wouldn't just be coke splashed on her. She recalled the first time that person failed. The silver hair that covered her eyes. The moment she looked at the game page, the moment of confusion, the bleeding fingers. No one cared. They only cared about winning or losing the game. There would even be people who would come out to despise the youngster, even if he was already covered in injuries. Jianghu looked at Shui Yaoyao's expression. His eyes were cold. "You care so much about that kid from the Fu family? Let me see how much you care about him. I can choose not to help Wu Zhen, but you have to accompany me until I'm satisfied." Shui Yaoyao froze, looking at Jianghu in disbelief. She wasn't a child anymore. She understood what he meant by, "Come and accompany me until I'm satisfied." Jianghu held a cigarette. "What? You can't do it? Don't force yourself if you can't." Shui Yaoyao watched as he took the phone from her palm and blurted out, "I can." Jianghu's fingers froze. Shui Yaoyao glanced up. "As long as you don't help Wu Zhen deal with His Highness Jiao and don't tell Almighty Qin about what happened today, I can." Heh. Jianghu took a deep puff of his cigarette to suppress the unknown stuffiness in his heart. This is the rhythm of being an escort for the youngster he loves. Shui Yaoyao had always known how nasty Jianghu's words were to people he hated. But this time she did not dodge. "You're the one who made the request. I thought you would hate me. After all, you've always said that I'm dirty. I didn't expect you to make such a request." Jianghu's smile turned colder. "Shui Yaoyao, do you think I won't take revenge on you for sleeping with me? I asked you to accompany me just to get back at you." I know. How could he not know? Otherwise, it would be too difficult to explain why he made such a request. Shui Yaoyao thought that since it was a deal, there must be a time limit. "When will you finish your revenge?" Jianghu extinguished the cigarette. "Depends on my mood." Chapter 774. "I'll use a year's time to make amends. After a year, I hope that you can find your own happiness and forget all the despicable things I've done. I won't appear in front of you again. Is that okay?" Jianghu clenched his fists, leaning over forcefully. He dragged Shui Yaoyao to the darkest corner of the yard and pressed her against the wall. Then he smiled like a playboy. "My interest in revenge won't last for a year. You overestimate yourself, heh. I know, but there are some things that we have to make clear in advance. It's good for both of us." Shui Yaoyao took out her phone and opened the photo album in front of him. She found a photo of a sleeping beauty and quickly deleted it. Jianghu watched her actions, the light in his eyes dimming. Fortunately, he was rational. Otherwise, he would have shouted for her to stop. That was crazy. He had never liked to threaten others. But this time he didn't know what was going on. She probably wanted to take revenge. Sometimes he really wanted to ask her. Didn't she say that the photo was important to her and that she just wanted to keep it to remind herself that she liked him? But now she deleted the photo for someone. Important? Actually, it wasn't important at all. Or had she found someone more important than him? For example, Spade Z. Jianghu thought she had a chance to get close to that kid. With Qin Mo around. That kid was like a prey that had already been marked. It was just a matter of time before anyone could escape from Qin Mo's hands. He had never thought of agreeing to Wu Zhen. He didn't like to abuse his privacy. Or was he the same as those people in her eyes? Jianghu lowered his head, looking at the empty photo album with an indescribable frustration. Shui Yaoyao saw his expression and thought he was still worried. I don't have a computer and I can show you my email. There are no backups. I know I'm not trustworthy in front of you. You can take your time to test me. Does your Highness Jiao know about such a huge sacrifice? Jianghu laughed again, but this time his fringe covered his face. Shui Yaoyao's gaze froze. She doesn't need to know. But she had to tell her Highness Jiao that Wu Zhen was investigating. How touching. The last trace of warmth in Jianghu's eyes was sucked away. He suddenly bent over and bit Yaoyao's lips. The scent that belonged to a man poured in at once. At that moment, Shui Yaoyao's mind went blank. When she looked at him again, she realized that the vengeance had begun. Far away in the county hospital, Wu Zhen looked at her phone that had been hung up. When he called again, the other side didn't even pick up. Even the look in his eyes changed. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand. What was going on with Jianghu? Su Mei saw that she could not get through and knew that something was wrong. She said, "Young Master Zhang's phone is not working. Miss Wu, you can try to find someone else. The rank of the troops stationed in the county should be very low. It could be your friend or old Wu's friend." Wu Zhen had wanted to get Jianghu to do it quickly since the Jiang family's military power was second only to the Qin family. But Su Mei was right. There was no need to hire a broadsword for such a small place. After thinking it through, Wu Zhen dialed her grandfather's number. Chapter 775. He instructed Wu Zhen to pass the phone to the officer in charge. Wu Zhen could tell from his aura that there wouldn't be a problem. Unexpectedly, the officer answered the call but said to the other party, "This matter is not under your jurisdiction. You have no right to ask." The officer turned to Wu Zhen. "Niece, your case is a little complicated. It should be the military investigating something. The other party isn't an ordinary soldier. You should come back." He was trying to persuade her. But Wu Zhen wasn't going to listen. She felt that his rank was too low. He was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. He couldn't even manage a small city. Wu Zhen tried to think of a solution. The leading officer swept her a glance. He took out his phone and sent a message. "Young Master, all the information has been sealed. I've asked the hospital director and Wu Zhen and Su Mei are looking for young Master Jiao's birth file. Once we find it, I'll seal it and send it to you. However, Wu Zhen is currently looking for someone and a military commander just called. Should I reveal my identity to ensure the operation continues?" When Qin Mo received the message, a certain someone was checking his temperature. Bo Jiao heard the phone ringing. When she unbuttoned his shirt, she arched a brow. "Aren't you going to look?" "I'll check your temperature first." Qin Mo replied calmly. The intelligent Bo Jiao quickly realized that it wasn't convenient for the Almighty to look at the message in her presence. Hence, she found an excuse to go downstairs since the Almighty would only be so guarded against her when he was investigating a case. At times she was rather understanding. Bo Jiao picked an apple and bit into it, intending to give the Almighty some space to investigate. But that wasn't the case. She would never have expected Qin Mo to be investigating the birth of this body. Qin Mo turned on his phone. While the youngster wasn't around, he made a call. The Special Forces soldier picked up immediately. "Young Master. Don't reveal your identity, look for the file personally. Once you find it, don't look at it. As for the rest, let her cause trouble." Qin Mo's voice was calm. "After she causes trouble, uproot her connections and the Wu family. If the Wu family wants to interfere with the military, they will be punished according to military law." "Yes." The Special Forces soldier couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Young Master's methods were still the same as before. It was really a sharp blade that could not see blood. Everyone knew that if he were to reveal his identity now, Wu Zhen wouldn't look for anyone else. "I will also settle down." But he did not want to be exposed. With Miss Wu's temperament, she would probably break more and more rules. At that time he would make his move. Indeed, even old Master Wu could not get her out of there. Of course, if she didn't make a fuss, everything might have turned around. Therefore this was the cycle of karma. Wu Jin never believed in karma and only believed in power. In the face of money and power, who wouldn't give in? She threw money around and someone would help her. Similarly, as long as she used her power, she would be able to make those soldiers who stood in her way return to the army. What she didn't expect was that when she asked the officer to answer the phone for the second time, the officer raised his eyebrows and said a few words to the other side of the phone before hanging up. Then he added, "Miss Wu is suspected of bribery and obstructing our department from carrying out its mission. If there's any problem, we'll discuss it in court." Chapter 776. The military had always been swift in their execution. The moment he finished his sentence, someone pressed down on Wu Jin's hand. Wu Jin had never been treated in such a manner. In the past she had been the one arresting others. Who could arrest her? She was the sole heir of the Wu family. "Do you know who I am? How dare you send me to the military court?" Wu Jin narrowed her eyes, her voice turning cold. "I'm here to investigate a case. Since when did the military have the right to arrest a police officer? If you aren't clear about your duties, call your regiment commander. You won't be able to bear the consequences of offending someone you can't afford to offend." The soldier swept her a glance, his tone indifferent. "Miss Wu, you don't have to worry. What consequences can there be for me to carry out my duties? Instead, after being fired, you refused to hand over your badge and obstructed the military's mission. You even found a bunch of people to make me answer the phone. As a businessman, when can the Wu family command the military? Or does Miss Wu think it's fine for you to abuse your power with your family's power?" Wu Jin lifted her lids. "You're from the crime squad? Did Director Huang ask you to come?" She hadn't thought about Chinemo, because Wu Jin felt that she had done it without anyone knowing. Unless it was someone from the crime squad who had been trying to push her out, that was why they came up with such an excuse. She knew Fatty Huang didn't like her. Her grandfather had said that if Fatty Huang made her leave the crime squad, he would definitely find a chance to get revenge for her. Hence, Fatty Huang bore a grudge against her. Wu Jin narrowed her eyes, scoffing coldly. "I'm just here to investigate something. It has nothing to do with the crime squad. What right do you have to control me?" The soldier watched her, wondering how she managed to get into the police academy. She was an insult to the profession. "There's no need for the crime squad to control someone like you. Miss Wu, you've been pampered for too long. Have you forgotten that as an ordinary citizen, there's nothing you can and can't do? You've already been fired, yet you're still pretending to be a police officer. Miss Wu, do you think the Wu family will be able to bail you out? Don't worry, it won't happen again. Take her away." Wu Jin clenched her fists at the last word. She wasn't done with the crime squad. Wu Jin was brought to the military vehicle and Su Mei couldn't escape. Those who stayed behind continued to look through the files. All of a sudden, only the sound of paper flipping could be heard. Piles and piles of files were carried in and carried away. There were very few people who knew about this. One of the characteristics of the military was secrecy. The director of the hospital was not stupid. Of course he would not do such a thing. What's more, he had heard enough. The people who came to find him at the beginning were no longer from the police. From the looks of it, he was making things convenient for someone who shouldn't be making things convenient, so he didn't dare to say anything else. With a bunch of soldiers standing in front of him, his legs went soft. But what exactly were these people investigating? He couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. The night deepened. Qin family, main family. The armed policemen were still standing outside. From the inside of the house, he could even see the sentries standing guard. There are so many armed policemen stationed here. Why aren't they giving people a chance to kidnap them? Bo Jio placed one hand in her pocket, tossing the apple core into the bin as she muttered to herself. Madame Zhang thought Bo Jio was looking at something. She tilted her head and glanced over. Then she smiled. "Young Master Jio, do you think the courtyard is too quiet at night?" "That's right." Bo Jio lifted her lips, calm and composed. She didn't reveal her intention to kidnap them at all. Madame Zhang held a plate of freshly cut oranges in her hands. She must have seen Bo Jio munching on the apple and couldn't help cutting a plate of oranges. She knew young Master Jio had a big appetite. "I think it's too quiet too. Fortunately, young Master Jio is here." Madame Zhang couldn't help but smile as she spoke. Madame is rarely at home and boss is always in the army. Young Master usually eats alone, so there aren't many lively times at home. But it's different now that young Master Jio is here. Young Master's appetite is obviously much bigger than before and he even smiles occasionally. Even though young Master doesn't say it as a servant, I know that young Master likes young Master Jio's presence. Even Madame is very grateful to young Master Jio for accompanying young Master. After all, Young Master's personality is indeed difficult to get along with, so I hope that young Master Jiao can be more forgiving in the future. Bo Jiao took the oranges from Madame Zhang's hands and smiled lightly. Madam, don't worry. I'm the kind of person who knows what I'm doing. I know how Brother Imo treats me. Similarly, how important that person was to her. She knew it clearly. There were many things. She didn't want to scheme anymore, and she didn't want to be on guard anymore. If it had been someone else, she would have made sure nothing would go wrong. But that was Qin Imo. That was the Qin Imo who had accompanied her for 3 years and 2 months when she was young. That was the Qin Imo who wanted her to kidnap him and leave without a care for anything else. That wasn't someone else. Bo Jiao fiddled with one of the oranges. If she was destined to live in darkness for the rest of her life, she hoped that the lamp named Qin Imo couldn't be extinguished, even if they became enemies one day. He was also the most important person to her and the person she couldn't bear to drag into the darkness to accompany her. Madame Zhang watched the gentle smile on the youngster's face and heaved a sigh of relief. After all, young Master hadn't seemed happy when he had returned yesterday. I'll have to trouble young Master Jiao to take care of young Master today. Honestly, I was shocked when young Master Jiao appeared in the morning. Speaking of which, young Master Jiao, how exactly did you come in? I clearly remember that I locked all the doors. Bo Jiao touched the bridge of her nose. In order to maintain Madame Zhang's impression of her as an understanding person, she didn't want to tell her about climbing the wall. Bo Jiao changed to a more tactful way of saying, the back door wasn't locked. You must have forgotten? Back door? Madame Zhang was still trying to recall. Bo Jiao had already carried the oranges upstairs. Hey, wait, young Master Jiao, where's the back door? Of course, Bo Jiao wouldn't turn back. How was she going to explain? Besides, she had been plotting to kidnap the Almighty just a moment ago. If Madame Zhang found out about her thoughts, she would never dare to trouble her young master again. Bo Jiao didn't have free hands. She lifted her legs and bent her knees to push the door open. Qin Imo heard the commotion outside. He glanced up, replying leisurely, what is it? The wall-jumping scholar can't take it anymore and is about to be exposed? Bo Jiao thought to herself, what's the big deal about being a wall-jumping scholar? She placed the oranges down elegantly and reached for the 2 laptops. I won't be exposed for now. As long as there aren't any cameras outside, I'll be safe. Qin Imo watched the youngster, his lips lifting. Bo Jiao felt that his expression wasn't right. She paused. So, there are cameras? The Almighty's reply was to take the remote control and press the power button with a smile on his face. The internet-connected television was switched on. Bo Jiao couldn't possibly not recognize the figure on the screen. It was obviously herself. But the cameras were well hidden. She had intentionally avoided the cameras outside. She hadn't expected there to be another one. She didn't need to guess to know who it was. As compared to the school's wall, the height of my room isn't much to you. When the Almighty spoke, he never forgot to bring up some dirt on her. Bo Jiao was already used to it. She sat there with the Almighty and admired her dashing figure. She had wanted to confirm the position of the last camera. Qin Imo was watching too. Compared to Bo Jiao, he was more focused on the moment the youngster reached out her right hand to grab onto the wall. Her fair waist was exposed. It's pretty? Bo Jiao assumed the Almighty was referring to her skills. She didn't think much about it. Since it was a dark history, she wanted to delete it. The Almighty was one step ahead of her and pressed save. His action was very casual. Bo Jiao couldn't understand why the Almighty would keep the video of her climbing the wall. It seemed like he was collecting her dark history. For instance, the next time he called her a scholar, the Almighty had allowed her to watch the video. However, Bo Jiao was still too naive. The reason why Qin Imo kept the video wasn't just to leave dark history behind. More importantly, there was a particular scene that made him feel. The moment his eyes sank, Qin Mo's throat moved slightly. In the end, it took a lot of patience. Only then did he suppress the rising thoughts, including the dashing movements. He just wanted to press the youngster onto the ground, pull up the irksome uniform, open the back of the t-shirt, and bite her fair waist and back. He wanted to see her trembling, struggling, unable to support herself, crying and begging for mercy. Qin Imo didn't forget that he was pretending to be a patient. He gulped down a mouthful of water and turned off the video. His handsome side profile didn't reveal any of his thoughts. Tomorrow was the first match of the National League. Bo Jiao grabbed both laptops, wanting to use this chance to perfect her adjustments. Brother Imo, let's play? Pass the game? Qin Imo arched a brow. Bo Jiao smiled. PK. The Almighty had always been an opponent that people wanted to challenge, be it in the game or in real life. Qin Mo swept the excited youngster a glance. I'm not playing. Why? Based on the way the Almighty had added her in the past, he didn't seem like someone who didn't want to win. Qin Mo watched her, his tone calm. Because I won't PK with someone I like. Bo Jio hadn't expected such an answer. She stilled. She moved the laptop away. Next, she carried Princess up and rubbed him into a ball. It wasn't easy to reply to the Almighty's words. Princess really wanted to bite him. F***ck, he wasn't a plush toy, he would have a temper if he rubbed him like that. Qin Mo watched her actions, his lips curved upwards. He placed the laptop aside. Come over, take his temperature. Didn't I just take it? Bojio finally let go of Princess. Giving a male cat a pigtail was an insult to its bloodline. Princess was furious. He walked a few steps forward valiantly. When he realized his reflection in the mirror wasn't bad, he stopped clawing at Bojio. Qin Mo glanced at his stupid cat before returning his gaze to Bojio's face. It's fine if you don't take my temperature. Go get a towel, my body temperature seems to be rising. Bojio immediately reached out to touch Qin Mo's forehead. It wasn't hot. But even if it wasn't hot, she had to take good care of him. Her pet had always been weak and sickly since young. She pulled open his collar and placed the thermometer inside. Bojio took a closer look and realized his face hadn't recovered. His lips were still pale. Almighty Qin had put in a lot of effort to make himself look weak. One of them was the art of expressing one's emotions. He looked at the person in front of him, so clean that he could almost see the layers of fur. Her posture was one that he was satisfied with. He couldn't help smiling. When Bojio saw the smile, she was reminded of Madame Zhang's words. She suddenly had the urge to confess everything. But Bojio knew better than anyone else. The issue between them had never been a matter of gender. One of them was in the light while the other was in the dark. He had his own rules. She had her own protection. Just looking at the Almighty, Bojio would always be reminded of the time when she wanted to buy him. Even though she knew she couldn't have him, she still wanted him. But Bojio understood. She couldn't touch someone like the Almighty so easily. Of course she couldn't bear to touch him. She wouldn't let go of anyone who touched him. In reality, Bojio didn't just nibble on an apple when she went downstairs. More importantly, he was communicating with Lawyer Bai. As a lawyer, regardless of how young he was, he would always have his own way of hearing things from the past. Including the Almighty's hand injury. Lawyer Bai was indeed reliable. In less than a minute he replied, "You have to pay more for the Qin family's matter." Sure. As long as she could find out what exactly happened. The international serial murder case. Lawyer Bai's message was short but every word was useful. All the information has been sealed. If you want to find out more, you will have to hack into the crime squad system. Everything about Qin Mo isn't ordinary, especially his past. I advise you not to investigate him casually, it's hard to say how deep his waters are. Bojio chuckled. My waters are deep too, I'll send you the money when I get home and give you preferential terms. Lawyer Bai, are you going to dismiss me with just one sentence? MMH? Lawyer Bai's tone didn't change. Special forces, that's all I know. From a lawyer's perspective, the case wasn't handled perfectly because Qin Mo misunderstood someone. But no one knows why he jumped into the water to save a criminal. This is an international case and it's hard to investigate the cause of his injury. You can only rely on analysis. But there is one thing, ever since that day he hasn't been involved in the crime squad, he has been playing esports and managing the Qin group. Lawyer Bai's tone didn't change at all. Lawyer Bai's tone didn't change. This meant that the case was a knot in the Almighty's heart. As long as she knew the details of the case, she would be able to find out why the Almighty's hand was injured. Bojio lowered her lids, still looking like the youngster. But there was only one thought in her mind. Chapter 777. The Almighty's call interrupted Bojio's thoughts. But this time it wasn't news from the special forces. Instead it was from the crime squad. The words Little Huang flashed on the screen. Bojio glanced at the caller ID, her hand pausing as she wondered who it was. For the Almighty to give her such an adorable nickname. Unexpectedly, the Almighty picked up the call calmly. What's up? The person on the other end of the line replied calmly, something big. Even though it was just 2 words, Bojio could tell who it was. It was obviously Director Huang from the crime squad. Director Huang was equivalent to Little Huang? The Almighty's nickname was unparalleled. But there was one thing, the Almighty didn't seem to mind speaking in front of her. Bojio could vaguely hear the other end of the line. About that woman we already have an answer. Just like what you said, it's not that simple. There's a dating app that can locate nearby cars. Some drivers will post messages on it. If the girls are willing, they can provide their phone number to the driver, and the driver nearby will call the girl and send her home. But this kind of driver's car is usually registered with the software company, so there shouldn't be any problems. But the girl also confessed that it was because of that time that she contracted AIDS, and, once again, Bo Jio was certain that Almighty Qin had no intention of avoiding her. Because when Director Huang paused, he asked, "And what?" "And we've checked, the car she left her phone number in doesn't seem to be the same car that came to pick her up. Although the driver also drove a BMW, it was clearly recorded on his dashcam that day that he picked up another girl. After sending her home, he also went home, so we ruled out the possibility of that person committing the crime." After the people below told the woman about this, she was in a bad mood. She said she didn't expect that note to be real. Qin Mo's gaze sharpened. What note? There was a note left at the hotel. At first she didn't pay much attention to it. She thought it was a joke, but now that she thought about it, it was all premeditated. Because there was a line written on the note, "Guess who's going to be the next one to get sick?" Director Huang's voice was clearly softer as he spoke. Because if everything was premeditated, then the nature of this matter would be different. Who do you think will be next? It was obvious that this was a serial case. And if it is such a case, the perpetrator would then become a very unstable propagator. The AIDS in his body was his best killing weapon. Bo Jio had wanted to display her professionalism and respect the Almighty's privacy. However, the Almighty had no intention of letting her go. He even directly asked about the details of the case. Where did they have sex? Do you have the relevant hotel records? It's useless. The woman said she used her ID card to book the room because the man said he forgot to take the red wine in the car and wanted to get it first. He asked her to send the room number to his phone after she booked the room. That's not going to help. Bo Jio couldn't help whistling. This whistle was coincidentally heard by the minion. His eyes widened and his round and bulging body exclaimed, "What's going on?" Qin Mo swept the youngster a glance, replying calmly, "My cat." Director Huang felt that the answer was an insult to his intelligence. Whose cat would whistle? Just as he was about to question him, a cat's meow came from the other side. Bo Jio pulled Princess over, caressing him. Princess wasn't just meowing, it wasn't just the tip of his hair. Did she think he didn't have a temper by caressing him? Qin Mo still looked sick, but his voice made them clench their teeth. You should have heard it, he isn't peaceful today. Not only did this sentence tarnish his pet's reputation, it also caused Director Huang to swallow all the questions in his mind. She said listlessly, "Then ask your cat why it whistles." Qin Mo replied slowly, "We'll discuss that later." The hotel corridor didn't capture the man's face? No, it's not because he was in disguise, but because there were too many people at the hotel that night. He followed a lot of people into the elevator, and after he got out of the elevator he kept his head down so the cameras didn't catch anything. Director Huang clenched his teeth. It was obvious how much of a headache this case was for him. Qin Mo replied faintly, "Got it?" He prepared to hang up. Director Huang sighed. "Can't you give me some psychological profiling so that I can arrest him?" "Yes, I'll send it to you later." With that, he hung up and looked at the youngster in front of him. "Tell me, why did you whistle just now?" Bo Jio smiled faintly. The two of them went to the hotel and the girl paid the bill. The man is either handsome or rich. Oh. Qin Mo arched a brow. What do you mean? Bo Jio placed her laptop down. For example, handsome men like me and Brother Mo, there are many who want to give birth to our babies. If they can sleep with us, they wouldn't care about the money. It was the same logic as if the Almighty was willing to be kidnapped by her, but she had to leave a sum of money behind. Compared to the money, the Almighty was more important. Tell me about the second scenario. The youngster leaned against the balcony and sat on it. That posture was very handsome. She lifted the corner of her lips, and the mole under her eyes was very obvious at that moment. The girl thinks that the guy is too rich, so she wants to cast a long line to catch a big fish. That's why she doesn't care about the small things, because she thinks that the guy will give her more than that. Brother Mo, you're a psychology major, so you should be able to guess what I'm saying. Besides, your phone's volume isn't low, and it's impossible for a boyfriend and girlfriend to make an appointment through a dating app. So, the first thing to eliminate is the possibility of an intimate relationship between the two of them. That leaves only handsomeness and money to make the girl pay for a room, but I guess the latter is more likely. Qin Mo glanced up, gesturing for the youngster to continue. Bo Jio tilted her head, exuding the devilish aura of a playboy. If I was the one getting a room with a girl, I definitely wouldn't think of bringing red wine. This is the style of a rich person, driving a luxurious car with a bottle of good wine. It would be best if the clothes on her body were expensive as well. That way more people would be hooked since some girls care about such things. I'm guessing that the victim must have a strong sense of pride. Her monthly salary isn't enough, but she would spend 2,000 to 3,000 on cosmetics and 10,000 to 20,000 on luxurious items. She wants to be a phoenix without sewing. These are the most basic thoughts of a person. I can't judge if it's right or wrong, but it's obvious that the culprit is targeting this mentality of the girl. Because these girls aren't guarded against the rich, they would sleep with him on the first day. Bo Jiao had never imagined that one day she would be sitting together with the Almighty to discuss a case. Furthermore, they would be acting as friends. It was a unique experience and feeling. It was easy to feel a sense of excitement that she had never felt before. But very quickly, the excitement was extinguished by the Almighty's words. What if you were the one getting a room with a girl? Qin Imo tilted his head, his voice cold. I didn't know you had such thoughts. Bo Jiao paused, feeling a little guilty. It was just an analogy. It seems like you aren't good at physics, you should start learning Chinese again. Qin Mo's gaze didn't warm up. Who taught you to make such an analogy? Bo Jiao felt that it was better not to talk about academics. Bo Jiao felt that it was better not to talk about academic matters. She leaned closer to him and smiled. Brother Mo, isn't it about time for your psychological profiling? Since she had taken care of him for the past 2 days, Qin Mo's coldness dissipated. The culprit is between 25 and 35 years old. He isn't very handsome, but he isn't ugly either. He has a certain level of male charm and the smell on his body is very pleasant. He is also very particular about his clothes, clean and rich. He has a certain amount of free time and is extremely hostile towards vain women. He is unmarried. Bo Jiao had only guessed that the culprit was clean and rich. How could the Almighty have guessed so much? The smell on his body is pleasant? How could he have guessed that? It was understandable that he wasn't married, since married men would create a sense of distance. From Bo Jiao's perspective, the culprit was also unmarried. Moreover, he was between 25 and 35 years old and had a certain level of male charm. Bo Jiao had also guessed that he wouldn't be ugly. For instance, if he had a big belly like Director Huang, no matter how rich he was, girls wouldn't be willing to ride in his car or fork out money for him. Hence, the culprit definitely wouldn't look bad. In fact, his facial features were perfect and would be easy to spot. But the smell? Qin Imo lowered his lids to look at the youngster's furrowed brows. The silver hair on the top of his head was fluffy. Qin Imo lifted the corner of his mouth. Seems like the wall-jumping scholar isn't good enough. You didn't learn some knowledge in biology class. When a man and a woman are first attracted to each other, other than appearance, the scent they emit. Otherwise, why would some people take a shower before doing it? MMH? Bo Jiao didn't know how to reply. She pulled Princess over and started to caress him. Who would learn such things in biology class? Besides, other than the Almighty, no one would use such a method to analyze a case. This is going to be a troublesome serial case. It's obvious that the culprit's IQ isn't low. He's thought through everything thoroughly. I'm guessing that the original phone number has become a useless number that no one picks up. Bo Jiao's efforts weren't in vain. Qin Imo sat on the pure white bed, his brows arched. Director Huang didn't mention anything about the phone not being able to reach him. I guessed. Bo Jiao didn't avoid Qin Mo's probing. It's simple. If I were the culprit, I would prepare some tools. Every time I make an appointment with someone, the SIM card for the day would be rendered useless. After changing to the next target, I would use a new number to contact them. Even though the official SIM cards are all registered with real names, there are still ways to get one that doesn't require one's real name. The car plate would probably be tampered with as well, something that can be learned with a little money. Besides, the culprit would only appear on weekends when traffic is heavy. It wouldn't be hard to pass it off as real. Qin Imo fiddled with the lighter, his voice calm. Not a bad theory and concept for the culprit. Such a compliment was enough to make one break out in cold sweat. If it had been anyone else, they would have felt guilty. Bo Jiao knew she couldn't back down at this moment. With the experience from the previous livestream, it is indeed easy to guess. There was a smacking sound. Qin Imo kept the lighter, smiling at the youngster. You are hinting that the culprit isn't a newbie. It's never tiring talking to Brother Imo. Bo Jiao threw herself onto the bed, placing her arms behind her head. She knew the Almighty wasn't suspecting her anymore and could focus on the case. But I can't eliminate the possibility that someone is teaching him to do it. Before she could finish, Qin Imo spoke. He might be sick, but he was still behaving like a rich young master, exuding an aura of abstinence. Bo Jiao chuckled lightly. That was indeed what she wanted to say. It's a dating app, the messages are public but the girls' phone numbers aren't. Of course, it's easy for us hackers to find out, but it isn't easy for an ordinary person. This time, Chinamo didn't reply. Instead, he reached for his phone and dialed. Once again, Bojio saw the words Little Huang. She wanted to know what Director Huang's thoughts would be after he found out about his nickname. Director Huang couldn't be bothered about that now. When he saw that it was Chinamo, he was filled with excitement. Is the answer out? Serial murder case. Chinmo's voice was calm and emotionless. The mastermind is Z. It wasn't just Director Huang. Even Bojio stilled. Z was the mastermind? Bojio arched a brow. That theory? Combine the maiden's sacrifice and this case into one. Chinmo's gaze was heavy. I will send the psychological profile of the culprit to your email. Find the culprit according to the criteria. I don't care how you do it, tell the public not to make casual appointments. Director Huang replied, That's easy to say, but aren't you overthinking this matter? The maiden's sacrifice was initiated through the forums, but this time, it's through an app. I don't think they're the same. Both cases are carried out through the internet and the victims are all female. All of the culprits' information will reveal their psychological activities and they are all related to sleeping. The only difference is the method of sleeping, but the nature is the same. Most importantly, no culprit would leave a note to inform the public that he is the culprit so that the police can find him faster. This is Z's second challenge to the crime squad. Chinmo's every word seemed to hit the nail on the head. Director Huang's jaw dropped and he scratched his head. He scratched his head again. This is clearly a challenge to you. Our key case investigation unit has been implicated because of you. Don't make a move after you lock onto the target. I will send someone to contact the culprit and find Z. Chinamo hung up once he was done. He didn't give Little Huang a chance to react. Bojio felt that it was time to recommend herself. Brother Mo, what do you think about me contacting him? My hand speed isn't bad. Since it concerned her impersonator, she had to be more proactive. Chinamo kept his phone, replying lazily, No. All right. In that case, she could only follow the people from the key case investigation unit. She respected her pet's decision. But it wouldn't clash with her methods. Chinamo tilted his head and glanced at the youngster lying beside him. His tone carried a hint of warning. Behave yourself. If I catch you again, you should know the consequences. Brother Mo, where's the trust between humans? Bojio sighed deeply. It has been a long time since I've messed with the internet. Do you know what it means to a hacker? It's the world of lousy hackers. Even though he knew the youngster wouldn't be telling him the truth. The corners of Chinmo's lips lifted when he saw the depressed look on her face. Bojio lifted her lips, hopping off the bed to take a shower, but she didn't forget to bring her phone. She closed the bathroom door. The first thing she did was to turn on the noise-canceling shower. Amidst the sound of the shower, the youngster lowered her lids, her long fingers pressing on the screen. Her dark eyes were unprecedentedly bright, the letters turning into strings of words. Follow the crime squad member, hunting operation commencing Z. She raised her hand and sent the message. Bojio tugged off her uniform. The next thing she heard was the sound of water splashing. It was dark outside the window. But for the esports players, they could only feel it when they played at night. Ding. The sound of an email rang. Watanabe glanced at the person reading a comic on the floor behind him. Vice Captain, your phone is ringing? Amich. Hoshino glanced down. When he saw the line of words, he moved his fingers, choosing to delete it. Even the traces were erased. At this moment, he just realized it. He was really back. He wasn't sure when. It started to rain again. In a remote county hospital, the sound of documents flipping continued, suppressing the sound of the rain. Fortunately, they were all soldiers with good physiques. They weren't afraid of the cold in the archive room. If it had been an ordinary person, they would have been exhausted. The Special Forces soldier was there too. Since it was an order from young master, there couldn't be any mistakes. With him around, he felt that this matter was reliable. But it was undeniable that there were too many documents to check and they could only rely on manual labor. There weren't any shortcuts. Just when he thought they would have to check for another night to find what they were looking for, a voice rang out.